Listen to this. Those were the sounds of old crappy stuff, or vintage items, depending on who you ask. Young people love this, so to them it's not really crappy, until it breaks because it's old and finding spare parts might be difficult. A lot of people who grew up with this stuff, on the other hand, might find it crappy, obsolete, impractical, inefficient, and they certainly don't see why kids born in the early 2000s are attracted to this stuff. And unfortunately, some people have just been conditioned to think that new is always better and that you always need the latest upgrade. Why would you shoot grainy film photos and wait a week to actually see them when you can take a super high-res digital image and immediately count the hairs on someone's chinny chin? Why would you spend hours in a record store looking for a special edition copy of an album when you can just stream the whole thing right now? Perhaps even at 2x speed if you're in a hurry. Why would you use a manual toothbrush when you can use an electric one that connects to Wi-Fi and gives you detailed analysis of your brush strokes and their intensity? The modern world is freaking awesome. Do you want to go back to the way things were before? Do you? I'll give you an example of what it was like. Do you know when you see pictures of movies from the 70s and 80s and the kids are always sitting on the floor right in front of the television? I can't speak for anyone else, but I know why I did that. We didn't have a remote control. Can you imagine? If you wanted to change the channel to one of the other 3 options available, you had to get up and walk to the television and push a button on the television, or sometimes even dial a little knob to fine-tune the picture. By sitting right in front of it, you didn't have to walk so far. If you had long arms or a stick, maybe you didn't even have to get up at all. Long story short, the remote control is a great invention. It might have saved the eyesight of an entire generation. Sitting so close to the screen was obviously bad. Kids today have it so much better in that regard. I mean, look at how they watch television. Anyway, most people who grew up with these old television sets and similar things probably don't yearn for them. But people who were born too late to experience any of this do. So why the heck is that? Why do young people love old things? And why, from a certain point of view, is a lot of this stuff actually better? My first kid was born in the 2010s. He's Generation Alpha. When he was born, this is what a phone looked like. Here he is at age 3 with an old rotary phone. What I knew as a phone when I was growing up and when I was his age. This was his first time seeing one of these. This should have been a completely alien device to him. And yet, upon seeing it, he immediately picked it up and started talking into the receiver. Carl Jung would speak of the collective unconscious. Just like biology has a basic blueprint for growing your finger or your ear, and it's pretty much the same for everyone, there are certain parts of the human psyche that are the same for everyone too. He did not, however, speak of memories being inherited. That's the field of epigenetics. Epigenetics, not eugenics. Epigenetics. Bruce Lipton's work on this showed that our biology is shaped by more than just our DNA, that experience and environment change how our genes express, and those changes get passed down. Scientists at Emory proved it. They trained mice to fear a smell, and their grandchildren were born afraid of it. The fear was written into the DNA. So, young people who like old things reverting to some unconscious factory setting, or is it a conscious choice? Perhaps it's a little bit of both. I've had an iPhone since 2008 and I've gone through various iterations of it, and to me it's always been kinda same. No update felt truly special, except for the haptic feedback. Now, what does that actually do that you couldn't do before? Why would Apple design this? Why would it take a beautifully simple and streamlined device and add something that doesn't really do much other than emulate something mechanical? But more importantly, why do people like it? Because it's mechanical. Because it's tactile. It makes you feel. If you watch the intro to this video again with your eyes closed, and if you have ever placed a record on a turntable, or used an old typewriter, or set the aperture on an old camera lens, I bet you'd know the exact sensory experience of that particular action, and you'd be able to feel it just by listening to the sounds. And that's what people want. Young people especially. They want to feel something. They want something tactile. The digital age has taken a lot of that away and robbed an entire generation of a basic human need. And I think that's why, perhaps instinctively, younger people are seeking out old things and old technology. But I'm not 20 anymore, so I can only guess and make assumptions. If you're 20 and any of this resonates, let me know in the comments, or, get in touch if you want to buy any of my action figures from 1986. It could also be that they're partly influenced by popular culture, because there's this thing called the nostalgia pendulum. The idea is that culture runs in a roughly 30-year cycle. The stuff you had as a kid, the music, the clothes, the aesthetic of the world around you, that stuff imprints on you. And then 30 years later, when you're in your 30s, you're designing things or making music or directing films or building houses or businesses, whatever. You start pulling from that childhood imprint. You make art and products that references the things that made you feel safe and excited when you were 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever. And everyone around you who grew up in the same era does the same thing. You're channeling your nostalgic feelings through your creative output. So suddenly the whole culture tilts back towards that decade for everyone, including the people who weren't there. That's why the 80s were cool again in the 2010s. That's why 90s nostalgia came back with a vengeance in the early 2020s. And it's why right now you're seeing a lot of Y2K and early 2000 stuff creeping back in. The kids who grew up with it are now the adults making the decisions. But here's what I find kind of interesting. The cycle has always relied on decades actually feeling different. The 60s look different from the 70s, the 70s look different from the 80s. You can look at a photo from any of those decades and almost place it immediately. You can say, yeah, that's a weird-ass hippie who doesn't shower. 1960s. There's a punk rocker and some disco-type person. 1970s. There's a whatever the hell this is. 1980s. The music was different, the cars were different, the clothes were different. The whole vibe was unmistakable. But what does 2010 look like compared to 2026? It's the same phone with a slightly better camera, the same streaming services with more content and even more ads, the same apartment with slightly different IKEA furniture. 16 years of progress, and it all just looks like, I don't know, a software update. The Matrix has you. So, what happens to the nostalgia cycle when there's nothing distinct to actually, be nostalgic for? I think that's another reason this generation is reaching further back than any generation before them. They're not just pulling from 20 or 30 years ago, they're going back to the 70s. Some of them are into stuff from the 1940s or 1950s. If that's you, we should talk. Because their own childhood doesn't feel different enough from right now to trigger that nostalgia. So they skip past it and reach for a time when decades actually had an identity, when generations had an identity, when things looked and felt and sounded genuinely different from what came before. And I think that's kind of cool, because I get to promote myself as a film photographer and make these videos that will get lots of views and likes. Right? But it's also kind of sad at the same time. A whole generation born around the start of a new century, at the time of an industrial revolution, but without a clear identity and maybe even a sense of aimlessness. It's almost as if they're a lost generation. But let's keep it lighthearted here. Going down the rabbit hole of the 100-year ghost cycle is for another time. So, young people like old things because it makes them feel something. Does that in itself make old stuff better? No, but it's one hell of a good reason for liking it. I like old stuff too for that very reason, but also because things from before the turn of the century just seem to be built better. And even things that weren't built very well, things that literally are crappy, they still seem more real. In today's fast-moving world, it's like everything is created with the expectation that it will be replaced by something better in a relatively short period of time. Things aren't designed to last, they're not designed to be loved and treasured by the owner. Nearly every product is just meant as a stopgap for the next upgrade. Old things just feel more organic. Even mass-produced items just seem to have more personality because of the dedication and intention of the people who made them. Somehow just seem to be encapsulated. Old things have soul. As simple as that. Which brings me to another point, the joy of ownership. On a dark October morning in 1998, I was waiting outside my local video store because I wanted to be one of the first people to buy the VHS of this movie I had already seen 3 times at the theater. The movie's not important, it was just this film about a boat. But anyway, you don't get this anymore. Not in the same way. I stood in line, I paid for my VHS tape, I went home, and I enjoyed my boat movie. Then I put it on the shelf with my other VHS tapes that were neatly organized, alphabetically, and I took a moment to admire my collection. I would do the same thing with my CD collection, and today I do the same thing with my vinyl collection. Sometimes I'll grab one and I won't play the record, I'll just open the gatefold sleeve, admire the artwork, and read the liner notes. When was the last time you scrolled through your library of downloaded movies with the same admiration? They're probably spread across several platforms as well. And by the way, are you sure that everything you paid for is still there? When you buy something digital, you never really own it. You're just buying a perpetual license that could be revoked at any time. Here's one of many fun examples. In 2009, Amazon remotely deleted a Kindle book from people's libraries, a book that they had paid for, and yes, the book in question was 1984. The world today is obsessed with efficiency and productivity, which personally I really like. I want to get shit done, you know. But when everything is optimized for the end result and places less importance on the process and all the little imperfections and happy accidents along the way, everything is just too smooth, too clean. It's okay, or fine, and fine is bleh. It's boring, there's no texture to it, there's no evidence that a human being was involved. A scratch on a vinyl record isn't a defect, it's proof that someone played it. A light leak on a photograph isn't a mistake, it's proof that the camera existed in the physical world and light somehow made its way in through the camera body and exposed the film. These imperfections aren't bugs, they're the entire point. They're what create connection to, yes, inanimate objects, but also to the people involved in making them, and to how the environment and the universe itself shaped them over time. I see this in my own work as a photographer. I often shoot old lenses from the 70s on modern cameras. They flare, they have weird bokeh, the rendering is perhaps technically imperfect, and they produce images with more character than anything a modern lens could do. For the most part, in my opinion. I'm filming myself right now with an old Canon lens that cost $40. $40. The modern equivalent that would do pretty much the same thing would cost well over $1,000 and... Wait. Do young people just like old things because they're broke?